This video contains spoilers on all things Dexter.
What's going on? Where the hell are we? Paris?
I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. I sleep all night and I work all day.
He's a lumberjack and he's okay. He sleeps all night and he works all day.
When we last saw Dexter Morgan, his master plan was to take Hannah and Harrison and flee to a new life in Argentina. But that never happened. Instead, Deborah suffers a massive stroke following complications after she was shot by Saxon. Hannah and Harrison go to Argentina to wait for Dexter. Dexter kills Saxon, and amazingly, Batista and Quinn seem perfectly satisfied that this was merely an act of self-defense. Dexter sneaks into Deb's room during an evacuation, and he takes her off life support and decides it's a good idea to dump her body into the ocean. Dexter apparently fakes his own death, leaving his poor son all alone in Argentina with that nutjob Hannah. And then Dexter moves on with his life and decides he'd like to become a lumberjack?
He's a lumberjack and he's okay. He sleeps all night and he works all day.
So the last time we saw Dexter on our television screens, the date was September 22nd, 2013. And now here we are, 8 years later. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes, Showtime is resurrecting Dexter. Holy shit.
No sugar tonight in my coffee. No sugar tonight in my tea.
So what can we expect from Dexter Season 9? A lot of fans were terribly disappointed in the way the show ended. And yet, I'm sensing a certain degree of anticipation here from some fans. In a lot of ways, this is a shot at redemption, where they can set things up right for a much better ending. How do they do that? I think the best shot at redemption is to embrace the elements of the show that worked best. Which elements worked best during Dexter's 8-year run? Let's quickly recap the first 8 seasons.
Imagine how I felt when I tracked you down and found out you were exactly like me.
I don't have to imagine.
I thought the premiere season was solid. It started off a little slow, but it soon gained steam, and the story surrounding the ice truck killer was interesting enough. Of course, he wound up being Dexter's long-lost biological brother, Brian Moser. So as an audience, we learn about Dexter's dark origin along with him learning about it. And we also learn all about the code that Dexter strictly adheres to, as taught to him by his whack-job adopted father, Harry. We ultimately learn that Dexter was born in blood. And in an early defining moment, Dexter remains loyal to his stepsister Deb, choosing her over a life of bloody murder alongside his fellow serial-killing biological brother. It was a decent story with good storytelling technique to arrive at Dexter's origin reveal, but where Season 1 really succeeded was in setting the table and establishing its key cast of characters. The relationships Dexter had with Deborah, and more importantly his girlfriend Rita, largely helped drive the entire story. And then there were a group of interesting supporting characters that all contributed. Detective Angel Batista, Lieutenant Maria LaGuerta, Forensic Specialist Vince Masuka, Captain Tom Matthews, and of course, Sergeant James Dokes. The premiere season established the entire foundation of potential that would soon be fulfilled over the next few years.
End it now. Take responsibility for who you are, man. We'll go to the station together. I'll help you.
Season 2 had a lot of great things going on, and it was all spearheaded by the investigation into Dexter himself, the Bay Harbor Butcher. The writing was outstanding, and the filmmaking execution beautifully brought it to life. Dexter doing his best to desperately stay one step ahead of the FBI-led hunt against him produced some great tension. You had some new interesting characters. FBI Special Agent Frank Lundy was terrific as he led the hunt, and Dexter's relationship with his sponsor Lila provided a perfect counterpart to his relationship with Rita. All of this made for a very enjoyable Season 2 experience, and the performance behind Sergeant Dokes was the big standout for me, which is saying something because the performances throughout this part of the story were all very strong. In my humble opinion, this was the best season of Dexter in its entire run.
I want to do it.
You.
I've let you do all of the heavy lifting so far, and now it's my turn. I'm ready to get my hands dirty.
Season 3 continued on the course of quality story and solid execution, and the introduction of Miguel Prado provided a new twist where Dexter had a friend who seemingly shared his values. Dexter would soon learn that Prado was a monster in his own right, and one who refused to adhere to his still relatively sacred code. Miguel was no trophy, but he needed to be put down. It was a sensational performance that brought Miguel Prado to life, and his entertaining antics helped carry the season. But beneath the surface and equally significant was the budding relationship between Dexter and Rita that culminated in their marriage. The average everyday life. The camouflage resulting in normal everyday issues that surfaced as obstacles for Dexter's dark passenger is what really drove the overall story.
And I realized the only way it was going to work is if I jumped in with both feet.
I want to be a part of this family. And I know I need to jump in with both feet.
I'm glad, but...
I want to let you in.
That growing trend blossomed in Season 4, where the challenges provided by Rita, Esther, Cody, and now Harrison. These obstacles continue driving the story as their needs were often at odds with Dexter's dark passenger. And complicating matters further was Dexter's admiration for the Trinity Killer. For whatever reason, Dexter was convinced that Trinity somehow held the big secret he was missing out on. But in the end, Dexter's reluctance to kill Trinity resulted in the tragic murder of his beloved wife, Rita. While there was definite shock value here, this was the biggest writing blunder in the entire franchise. Rita was the glue that always kept things interesting during the powerhouse run the show experienced from Seasons 2 through 4. In a very real way, killing off Rita killed off the magic that drove the real momentum behind the interesting stories.
This don't look right.
What do you mean?
Well, usually you find a dead animal on the road, it means he was hit by a car, but there's no tire marks or blood on the asphalt. This raccoon was killed someplace else and dropped here.
He's CSIing me.
Season 5 still had a pretty good story, and the flashback scene to his first date with Rita was very good. The barrel killer story with Jordan Chase and Boyd Fowler. The story itself wasn't bad. Considering this was the first year of the show without Rita, the introduction of Lumen worked well. It gave Dexter more obstacles to deal with in the short term, and complicating matters for him was the fact that Quinn was initially suspicious of Dexter being Kyle Butler. Quinn got Stan Liddy involved, and Liddy was a great character during his relatively short run. I think Season 5 is a little underrated. They pivoted Rita's death into a redemption arc through Lumen, and I thought it was well done, all things considered. But the real problem here was this was but a band-aid for the bigger issue, that Rita's void represented an insurmountable setback.
So that darkness inside is gone?
No. Still there, but I'm fighting his ass every day. I really don't have much of a choice, you know.
Season 6 had some major problems. The biggest problem was the Doomsday Killers weren't especially interesting. Making matters worse, they threw a surprise twist at us that seemed completely out of context when compared with prior form. The payoff for this twist was almost non-existent. The other related big problem is that they showcased the wrong subplot. The redeeming aspects from this season all surrounded the Brother Sam storyline, which was abruptly cut short right around the same time as the silly Doomsday twist. The main story was not especially good, and the execution was subpar when compared to the previous 5 seasons. In Season 3, for example, the Skinner was an interesting side story that overlapped with the main story, and it worked perfectly. Season 6 should have showcased Brother Sam and kept a mediocre Doomsday subplot in the background like the Skinner. The worst thing about this season was Rita's absence left things dry. Season 6 ended on a somewhat interesting note, but once again they wrote themselves into a corner.
Crushed his skull with a fire extinguisher. The kind who's gonna do the same thing to you, give or take the fire extinguisher.
You're gonna regret sharing that with me.
Season 7 may have been the high point following Rita's death, but it still felt less complete than the earlier seasons during its prime. The Kashka Brotherhood plot was decently written and it was mostly well executed. The twist at the end where LaGuerta set Dexter up was another strong element. They set that up well with the blood slide on the scene that opened the door for Maria. Even the absence of Rita was less pronounced because we had the whole ordeal with Deb keeping tabs on Dexter as she tried to cope with the horrific realization that her beloved stepbrother is a serial killer. But this was another band-aid, and when Deborah finally accepted Dexter's code as taught by Harry, he had already fallen for Hannah, and that element of Deb acting as a Rita substitute fell apart. It was never the same in any case. It was a pretty good season, and it ended on Deb choosing Dexter over Law and Order as she disregarded everything she stood for in her new defining moment.
Because you made me compromise everything about myself that I care about. And I hate you for it.
No, you don't.
I shot the wrong person in that trailer.
This led to a lot of rehashed territory in Season 8, where Deb once again was coming to terms over her guilt for killing LaGuerta, not unlike how she learned to cope with the knowledge Dexter was a serial killer. That aspect seemed dull and dry and repetitive. The Vogel story wasn't terrible, but it probably could have been fleshed out a little better. But by this point in the show, the filmmaking execution lacked its prior magic regardless of the writing. The show was never able to replicate the type of tension it once regularly achieved during its earlier prime form. And then there was the silly lumberjack ending that fell flat on its face. It was poorly written, it wasn't well received, and it seemed at odds with everything the show was building towards. They'd have been better off ending it with Dexter meeting Harrison and Hannah, and then a few weeks later, the new beginning could have taken form and Dexter could have delivered his trademark line, "Tonight is the night." But instead...
He's a lumberjack and he's okay. He sleeps all night and he works all day.
So which elements worked best during Dexter's 8-year run? Well, in my mind, the best elements involved Dexter's 3 most important relationships. His relationship with Rita was undoubtedly the most important one that made the show work, but they screwed that up when they inexplicably killed Rita off at the conclusion of Season 4. Another key relationship Dexter had was with Deborah. But that bridge is now burnt as well because Dexter dumped her body in the ocean the way he would one of his victims. That leaves the relationship with Harry, which always worked well. Throughout the best and worst of Dexter, his relationship with his adopted father Harry acting as an inner monologue always added something flavorful to the story. Of course, Dexter occasionally substituted Brian Moser for Harry, so just because certain characters are dead doesn't mean they will not surface. After all, we have a 10-year timeline gap that needs to be partially filled. Mainly, what has Dexter been up to since becoming a lumberjack?
He's a lumberjack and he's okay. He sleeps all night and he works all day.
Is he still killing? Business as usual? Just without all the aids he had that came with the territory and his job as a blood spatter analyst? How they fill these gaps, and just as importantly, what storytelling techniques they use to fill these gaps. It creates an interesting opportunity where they have a time jump unlike any the show has previously experienced. The other elements that always worked well were that on some level, there was always a serial killer versus serial killer element that played out. Dexter needs someone to hunt, and whether that person is the main antagonist, as was the case with the ice truck killer and the Trinity killer, or whether it's more of a background hunt, as was sort of the case with the Skinner, Dexter needs a primary target. But beyond that, the best thing in Dexter's 8-year run was, in my humble opinion, the Bay Harbor Butcher subplot where Dexter himself was the one being hunted by law enforcement. Some combination of Dexter having a worthy adversary that he's hunting down, and an equally worthy law enforcement adversary who hunts him. I think that's the sweet spot of where they ideally want to take the story. Whether they even have a worthwhile story to tell here is the big question. And even if they do, and the writing somehow matches its peak form from seasons 2 through 4, will the execution of the writing be as solid as it was during those same prime years? That is the big question, and it remains to be seen. But whatever happens, I have faith Michael C. Hall will reprise the role with the same excellence and nuance that helped make Dexter one of the most beloved serial killers in television history, and the addition of Clancy Brown definitely brings added promise to the potential. Call me an optimist. I am looking forward to seeing how they approach this resurrection, and I am curious if they can indeed redeem the ending. The bright side is, it couldn't end any worse. So whatever they decide should bring us a better ending than the lumberjack ending that we got.
He's a lumberjack and he's okay. He sleeps all night and he works all day.
Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed, and have a wonderful night.
Tonight's the night. And it's going to happen again and again.
I have a dark side, too. What? I do.
Somehow I doubt that.
Your instincts were dead on. They're always dead on when it comes to killers. Why is that?
I'll just go get that report.
I'm watching you.
So I'm looking for a refrigerated truck now.
Probably a stolen one.
I never wanted to hurt you.
I know. I know.
Just make it easier for you because I can keep going.
Oh, God, what did you do?
I'm very fond of her.
You can't be a killer and a hero.
It doesn't work that way!
Dokes always sensed I was hiding something. Now he knows. My devil danced with his demon, and the fiddler's tune is far from over.
Did you hear that? 30 bags. Do you know what that means? It means there might be a new mass murderer out there, way worse than the ice truck killer.
Look, if there is anything left between us, you will answer me this one question, and you will tell me the truth. Are you an addict?
Yes, I have an addiction. Where's my sponsor?
Really, where? The guy in the blue shirt?
No, next to him. Lila.
You performed blood work that directly led to Rodrigo walking free. I asked myself, how the hell did that happen?
You make yourself into a monster so you no longer bear responsibility for what you do. Oh, I can't help it. I'm a monster. Oh, of course I was going to do that. I'm a monster. It's sad. And it's pathetic.
Jesus Christ, Morgan. Jesus fucking Christ, you're the Bay Harbor Butcher.
I really hate that name.
I always knew there was something with you. But this shit...
What can I say? You were right about me.
You want to make a change, Morgan, now's the time. All you gotta do is let me out of here. It's over, man.
It is over when I say it is!
Poor thing, all alone.
I'm okay. Just open the gate.
Not you. Dexter.
Lieutenant, all the evidence points to James Dokes as the Bay Harbor Butcher. Conclusively.
Hi.
Hi, Dexter. Are you guys back together? I guess we are.
Of course. Of course. We have to steer the police in the right direction.
How do we do this?
I don't have a fucking clue.
Dexter, my hands are tied by the law, and the defense attorneys get to wipe their asses with it, and everything that I believe in is compromised.
No doesn't really work in a relationship, Dexter. Can we talk about it is a little more productive.
I'm sorry, but I don't want to look at houses. Not now, anyway.
You and I, we're the same.
No one is like me.
I see who you are.
You can't. No one can.
You have nothing to explain to me. Nothing to apologize for. Ever. But I've already issued the subpoena. Galt will be here tomorrow night. Only he's gonna be a no-show on the witness stand the next morning.
This is personal.
Fuck yes, this is personal. And it should be personal for you too. That's my friend. I'm asking you to do this for me.
Sorry, no.
Well then fuck you! She's fucking with my life. I wanna do it.
You.
I've let you do all of the heavy lifting so far, and now it's my turn. I'm ready to get my hands dirty. Hey. In case we have to tie anybody up.
I'm gonna put together a starter kit for you.
I am the last person you wanna fuck with, because I will fuck you back in ways you never even imagined.
I'm kind of in the middle of something.
Oh, Harrison has an ear infection. He's in a lot of pain, Dexter. Whatever you're doing can wait.
Right, my mistake. I wasn't thinking. I'm on my way. Where are you, Trinity? Oh my God.
Don't touch my sister. I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Dexter, what do you have to do that's so important?
Stuff.
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 You can't cancel because of stuff.
Because helping someone is a good deed, and God rewards good deeds. But in order to help, I need to know the problem. That's how these things work.
I really don't want to talk about it.
You asked me. Remember? That's why I brought you.
Why don't we just...
Tell me, Kyle! Yeah, I'm so excited about today's surprise, I practically sprang out of bed. You ready for this? So ready. That's the spirit.
I don't want to do any damage.
You're a parent. Parents do damage. Hopefully we'll do enough of the good stuff to balance it out.
Hopefully.
Normally, Jonah supplies the football.
How about baseball?
No, we throw the baseball in spring. Thanksgiving, we throw the football. Traditions matter, Kyle.
At this point, we're trying to locate Mr. Stan Beaudry. He's become our #1 suspect.
Stan Beaudry?
I know, but it's an emergency.
So is this.
Why? We're doing better. I'm being all open and...
I kissed Elliot.
Got some business to attend to.
Other than stealing from your family?
Someone stole something from me. And I'm gonna find him.
That bitch put handcuffs on me. And then that no-nuts McCourt parades me around that station like I'm the goddamn carnival prize.
I know exactly what happened. 2 words. Autoerotic mummification.
Maybe it's true some people deserve to die. But I'm a cop and I don't make that fucking decision.
Oh, God. I just want to know you're okay.
I am not okay. I am never gonna fucking be okay.
Just try to take it easy.
I've never seen someone so excited about a crime scene before. You like this blood shit a little too much.
I'm just doing my job.
Then wipe that fucking smile off your face and help me find the creep who did this.
What if Dokes was onto him? Jesus, what if Dexter is the real Bay Harbor Butcher?
What if he isn't?
Look, Huerta.
She fucking set me up.
You're not the one who was set up.
You set me up.
Maria, can I go now?
Yes, you can. He did this. He's the Bay Harbor Butcher. He has to be. You're a good cop. You're a good person. You're not like him. Put him down! Beg. You can't kill me.
Why?
Because I don't fit Harry's code.
Listen, I just wanted to tell you one last time that I love you.
I love you too.
I want you to remember that every single day until I see you again. Daddy loves you.
Hey, how about we go get some ice cream, yeah?
Okay.
He cuts down trees, he skips and jumps, he likes to press wildflowers. He puts on women's clothing and hangs around in bars. He's a lumberjack.
And now for something completely different.
No sugar tonight in my coffee. No sugar tonight in my tea.